In response to today's environmental and social crises, technological innovation is valuable, but not sufficient. A surge of spectacular technologies has supported economies to expand in ways that degrade vulnerable people and places and disrupt the Earth's atmosphere, biosphere, and hydrosphere. Balance sheets have largely externalized those costs, but they're coming back to bite us. So today, I challenge you to mobilize your formidable creativity to think beyond upgrading technologies, to innovate organizations, relationships, processes, visions that shape the purposes to which those tools are applied and the outcomes that they create, even to rethink value. Business value creation is about increasing material and financial wealth for clients and companies. Can your organizations also create value towards degrowth goals, defined as a voluntary transition to just, participatory, and ecological sustainable societies? Oops. Here we go. Degrowth advocates work towards shared objectives, decrease the total quantity of material and energy that we use every day on Earth, curb personal and cultural obsessions with growth, and reorient our societies around equitable well-being and regeneration of life. In contrast to recession, the unwelcomed shrinking of growth-dependent economies, and different from austerity policies that try to reignite growth by slashing social welfare, degrowth motivates generation of different economies that aren't dependent on growth. While austerity calls for scarcity to activate growth, degrowth calls for abundance to render growth unnecessary. In anthropological theory, cultures of abundance work hard at assuring that everyone has well-being and diminish the desire to compete and hoard resources or get ahead at the expense of others. In economic theory, scarcity is created when there's less goods and services offered than are demanded. And coveting of scarce jobs and products is good because it motivates competition in production and consumption. Company cultures can actually activate different balances of these two vibes, right? So 30 years of researching in Andean and Amazon communities, I've observed a lot of practices of abundance. Historians trace the emergence of capitalism through a series of moves to create scarcity. In Europe, then the colonies, by enclosing commonly managed forests, pastures, waterways, forcing people to go sell their labor and then buy what they need in the marketplace. Some analysts see ongoing degradation of Earth systems as the ultimate enclosure, making scarce the very fundamentals of life: clean water, fresh air. As climate scientists lose faith in our capacity to transition before catastrophic warming, many are turning to negative emission technologies that you still need to invent. Right? But in the most recent IPCC reports, the only feasible scenarios are ones that encourage actively downscaling material use so there's less demand for energy. So how can we help create abundant worlds using less material and energy? IT offers phenomenal capacities to innovate systems. Let's take a little example here. You could work on inventing electric or self-driving cars to replace existing cars. Or you could work on developing smart city systems that optimize walking, biking, public transport that may include self-driving cars. Both decrease emissions, but since, as Peter mentioned, private cars tend to sit idle 95% of the time, the second option also saves metals, rubbers, parking lots. We could cut subsidies to make driving lanes, parking lots, fossil fuels more scarce, and reorient public funds towards innovations that make smart transportation more abundant. What we really need is the most brilliant human and artificial intelligence advertisers to make us imagine, feel, and desire different things. What would happen if instead of seeking power, freedom, virility by owning a sexy car, we were motivated to seek those pleasurable sensations through music, sport, lovemaking with our own sexy bodies? So here are some examples of different ways where you could prioritize adding to existing systems or making innovations that work to change the systems on a deeper level. In order to pick the second one, we need to address a series of myths of growth. First, everyone wants growth. It's true that in the past century, growth has become a dominant goal of political economies, companies, etc. But growth does not monopolize human intelligence. Scientists warn that expanding economies are breaching biophysical limits, pushing Earth systems towards irrevocable tipping points. World religions condemn ethics of growth. Starting with the 7 deadly sins of Christianity, the first one's pride, envy, gluttony, greed. Did you learn that in Sunday school? Right? How about Bhutan's Buddhist-aligned gross national happiness? And our Pope Francis, in 2015, he gave us a beautiful letter on climate change. And last week, he came out with a furious Laudato Deum saying, why the hell didn't you guys act? Right? So also around the world, environmental justice groups are fighting like hell to stop extractivism penetrating their territories and their lives. Even distinguished economists like Kenneth Boulding declare, anyone who believes that growth can go on forever in a finite world is either a madman or an economist. Second myth, bigger is better. So compulsion to pursue bigger technology, bigger profits, has led to legendary disasters. Imagine you're a 15th century shipping company that invented bigger and better and more detailed globes to improve navigation to the point that your ships got weighted down and sunk, right? Now consider the immense resource costs in building and running machine learning models and the enormous carbon footprints. On Tuesday, the New York Times headline shouted, AI's thirst for electricity is about to skyrocket. So we must debate what do we want to do with these technologies, balance right sizing, and actually measure their outcomes, which is clear in our next myth, green growth reduces environmental damage. The Statistical Review of World Energy announced for 2022 the largest ever increase in renewable capacities at 266 gigawatts. Yes, which Peter also mentioned. It also showed total increase of fossil fuels burned and emissions. So basically, renewable energies and energy-voracious information technologies are adding to a total growth. While global emissions continue to increase, some regions are decreasing CO2. Europe, yes. However, that's not the end of the story, because part of that achievement is done by displacing the costs, such as biofuel production that's forcing deforestation in the global south, desperate search for minerals, for solar panels, windmills, batteries, leading The Economist to announce last month, the world faces an almighty metals shortage. Next myth, increased efficiency leads to decreased resource use. In 1865, William Stanley Jevons observed that steam engines had been rapidly improving so they could do more work with less coal. People predicted that would let up on the demand for coal resources. But in fact, he saw that the opposite occurred. How is that possible? All kinds of industries were taking advantage of the better efficiency to adapt more and more coal power. A century later, in the face of OPEC, other crises, environmental outcries, people worked hard at making internal combustion engines run further on the same amount of fuel. Did that result in less world use of gasoline? No. During the next few decades, We doubled the number of cars per capita, and cars became bigger and heavier and fancier. So, this is the last myth. Growing production and profits lead to all good ends. I live in the country with one of the highest GDPs and energy uses in the world in absolute and per capita sense. But data don't suggest, in comparison, that the USA is more advanced in terms of environmental sustainability, social equity, mental health, happiness, literacy, life expectancy, child labor, murder, suicide, addictions, obesity, gun death, not even maternal and infant mortality. So how is it that these myths persist when they are so contradictory with empirical evidence? And they cause so much problems because they prevent the synergies of great technological progressions that Peter described that create efficiency together with a total reducing of demand, right? We could have great synergy there. These myths push us back. It's partly because growth ideologies are stoked by privileged actors who benefit disproportionately from growth and bear less burdens and risks. But even if Elon Musk flew all the 1% off to Mars, desire for growth would still persist amongst many, but not all, people and persons, even amongst some of those most degraded by growth economies. So, what will make your colleagues, clients, yourselves question these myths and work towards a change of course? The experiential ecologies described in the working papers for this summit, human cost of degradation, disasters, environmental refugees, or the soaring financial costs and logistics challenge posed by these new scarcities. Our futurist friend Buckminster Fuller applied his philosophy of doing more with less to creating a world of abundance where everyone could live comfortable and meaningful lives. Fuller really emphasized that we have to have wider horizons for imagining those worlds. So let's consider again this Jevons paradox, where innovations towards resource efficiency lower production costs and then motivate more use for more profit and more resource use, right? This rebound effect is not a universal law. We can create worlds where it doesn't work that way. And I'm going to give you one example to help. First, I want to say, on the short term, we're already doing things like matching efficiency cost with carbon fees, subsidy cuts, green taxes that keep prices high. But on a deeper level, we need to nourish institutions that drive us to purposes other than growth. Here's an example from the Ecuadorian Amazon, where this elder told me how during his life, people increasingly used metal fish hooks. They were much more efficient, but they didn't catch more fish. Why? Healthy people don't have an insatiable appetite to eat more and more. If you wanted to sell them for money, which wasn't even a big thing for them, they would have to canoe several days to get to a market. But most importantly, the community all participated in an explicit system of management where they agreed on quantities, times, and places where they could hunt and fish different things in order to maintain two commitments: enough nourishment for everyone today, and regenerating abundance for future years and future generations. So in this case, a new technology didn't create more work and more resource use, but more pleasure and more leisure. They could fish more quickly to indulge in other aspects of life. What arrangements could apply technologies, AI and otherwise, to reduce human labor and increase pleasure? Amid falling birth rates and narrow immigration policies, lots of wealthy countries are freaked out about future labor shortages. Certainly, AI can work with other technologies to increase productivity per labor hour of humans. That could go in two very different directions. It could motivate investors to exploit more hours of cheap human labor to create more profit, right? Woo! Or you could innovate systems that allow us to share, circulate the more than enough food, shelter, clothes that we already have, allowing everyone to work less and to indulge in more other activities. You can pick your own. So how can we orient our paths, our technologies towards living better rather than bigger? After the recessions of the 1970s, new IT was instrumental in pushing phenomenal growth of corporate profits, high-end salaries, and GDPs. The boom, right? That's the four-decade boom. It was also fueled by unprecedented increase in material resources, right? As Menno already showed with the Great Acceleration, here's some more charts, that began in the 20th century and really took a double Viagra lift right around the last 4 decades. That exploitation was highly unequitable. New transportation and information technologies allowed us to mobilize powerful supply chains that vacuumed up material, energy, and labor from the global south, moving it towards points of profit production in the global north. Just look at these quantities in tons of shifts. Even in wealthy countries, though, the rising tide of the boom didn't lift all ships. The World Economic Forum emphasizes the past 4 decades of growth have brought rising inequality in income and wealth in almost all OECD countries. So, MIT professor, wouldn't get there yet. MIT professor David Autor, one of the world's leading labor economists, has worked for decades looking at the role of computers. And he thinks computers have actually played quite a role in this increasing inequalities, partly by weakening the middle class. And he argues that it didn't have to be that way. The technology could have taken us in different directions, and he thinks AI also could, but we need to take responsibility for the purposes and the outcomes to which it is directed. So IT alone did not cause all of these really serious consequences of the boom, the techno-economic boom, but it's not totally innocent either. This collateral damage is not fully accidental. The great techno-economic boom, for some, depended on and exacerbated cheap access to and exploitation of other people and resources. So the lesson is not that we need to expand the boom to include everyone that was left out. No, we have to rethink a technical and economic world that doesn't depend on voracious expansion. Takes a lot of creativity. I challenged you in the beginning. All right, I understand it is not easy to balance business profit needs and revolutionary social ends, right? Bankrupt companies can't do good. However, as this great state-of-the-art session this morning showed on Sogeti zero-emission strategy, there's all kinds of new policy frameworks, rules, regulations, pushes that are really changing the game. After a whole century, when governments and international organizations purposely pushed and pushed to maximize corporate profit, we're seeing a turn in the landscape, and the companies, cities, initiatives that are ahead of that curve are going to do better. Right? So, public awareness also changing rapidly. Here's just some of the many books and some of our little book that's been translated 10 languages already show that there's eagerness to learn and think about new pathways forward. People are asking questions, which makes me wonder if we could just see a raise of hands. Does anyone here gotten a sense that any of your customers, clients, employees maybe want the company to do more than make profit, to maybe even contribute to healthier futures? Did you feel that in the atmosphere? Is there anyone whose company has already developed green products and green messages to respond? How about deeper changes? A few, yes. All right, they're possible. Companies trying to make those change, it's not clear how to move forward, but you're in luck because there's a recent off-the-press publication by 4 business and technology professors who studied 220 publications to find out how existing businesses are already moving towards degrowth purposes, towards voluntarily shifting towards more equitable and sustainable societies. And they found, I made just this summary. They've got this long article. You can look it up and indulge and learn from their useful toolbox that they've made to help existing competitive companies start to move forward in those ways. All right, in conclusion, green growth calls for mobilizing economic expansion to generate more financial resources to invest in technological innovations that might improve ecological and social well-being. Why don't we just work on well-being straight out instead of growing the whole dirty, destructive economy in hoping that it's going to come to different ends next time? Planetary dynamics, cultural and policy landscapes, experiential ecologies are changing quickly, generating needs and opportunities for radical innovations. This is not only a technical challenge, but also an ethical reflection and a deeply political one that acknowledges the entanglement of world-making technologies with the organizations and values and relationships that give those technologies meaning and purpose in our world. Let the report you have in front of you, Scarcity and Abundance, provoke conversations about the social and ecological impacts that your company is contributing to, and reflections about how you might collaboratively reorient values, decision-making priorities, so that generative AI can empower you to move from a degenerative force to a regenerative one. Onward.
Thank you.